Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottam Devim Saraswati Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye. Thank you very much. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 3, text number 3. To Arjuna's question, Krishna first of all admits that he has mentioned two paths, and he also mentions that each of these paths is adopted according to the inclination of the practitioner. So that means there are two kinds of inclinations. One is to use one's intellect to understand, and the other is to engage in yoga or karma yoga in this case. Shri Bhagavan Vacha Lokesmin Vividha Nishtha Pura Prokta Mayanaga Jnana Yogena Sankhyana Karma Yogena Yogina. So Dvividha Nishtha, two kinds of Nishtha, faith. But I use the word inclination, so we will discuss that in the purport. Pura Prokta, I have spoken of this formerly, two kinds, Maya Anagha, or sinless one. Jnana Yogena, for the Sankhyana, for the empiric philosophers, and Karma Yogena for the Yogina. Prabhupada translates as for the devotees. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, O sinless Arjuna, I have already explained that there are two classes of men who try to realize the self. Some are inclined to understand it by empirical philosophical speculation, and others by devotional service. So the idea is the word realize the self is not actually in the verse, but that's what it means by nishtha, two kinds of faith for this particular purpose. What was mentioned was loke asmin, in this world. So in this world, which is not found in the translation, there are two classes of men. One have the inclination, the nishtha of empirical philosophical speculation, and the others have the nishtha, the inclination, to perform devotional service, to engage in devotional service. So it's interesting, the word anaga is used by Krishna. Anaga means sinless person. It kind of indicates, well, it does indicate that the student of the Bhagavad Gita should also be like Arjuna, anaga, free from aga, sins. Therefore, no meat eating, fish and eggs, no illicit sex, no gambling, no intoxication, tea or coffee. Now the word Pura Prokta refers to chapter 2, text 39, Esha te vihita sankhe buddhi yoge manustri. So there, Krishna mentions Buddhi Yoga and this Sankhya, Sankhya that I've explained to you by analytical understanding, and now I'll explain by Buddhi Yoga. So we find that Lord Krishna, see, yesterday we discussed how Prabhupada equates Jnana Yoga with Krishna consciousness, with Buddhi Yoga. Krishna himself is equating Sankhya with Jnana Yoga, and he's equating Buddhi Yoga with Karma Yoga. Okay? So just to bear that in mind, that the Lord himself is using those two interchangeably. And specifically, Srila Prabhupada is identifying the Sankhya Yogi as the speculator and the yogi as the devotee. Okay. So now Prabhupada writes, in the second chapter, verse 39, the Lord explained two kinds of procedures based on the Nishtha, namely Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga or Buddhi Yoga. In this verse, the Lord explains the same more clearly. Sankhya Yoga, so Arjuna is confused because Krishna has explained two kinds of faith, two kinds of inclinations. And he forgets that one is adopted by one kind of person and another is adopted by the other with a different inclination. So Sankhya, Prabhupada writes, is for persons who are inclined to speculate and understand things by experimental knowledge and philosophy. The other class of men work in Krishna consciousness. So that these are natural. In other words, actually there's no harm in either of those processes. As it is explained, the other class of men work in Krishna consciousness, as it is explained in the 61st verse of 2nd chapter. And that verse, just you can look it up, but it says Tani Sarvani Sayamya Yukta Asita Matpara. So remember the person Yukta who engages himself in Matpara in sake of Krishna and thereby controls his senses. So really one is adopting this method, the other one's adopting another method. The Lord has explained also in the 39th verse that by working by the principles of Buddhi Yoga or Krishna consciousness, one can be relieved from bonds of action. And furthermore, there is no flaw in this, in the process. So this is referring to the next verse after 39, Neha Bikram Anashasti. There's no loss, therefore there's no flaw. The same principle is more clearly explained in the 61st verse, which was that Tani Sarvani Sanyamya. That this Buddhi Yoga is to depend entirely on the Supreme, that word Matpara. And in this way, all the senses can be brought under control very easily. Vashyahi Yasya Indriyani. Okay, now Prabhupada says, therefore, both the yogas are interdependent. One yoga is emphasizing religion, Prabhupada writes, as religion and philosophy. In other words, one is emphasizing the practice and the other is emphasizing the understanding, the philosophy, the understanding behind the practice. Then he says religion without, this is Prabhupada's famous, very apt statement, religion without philosophy is sentiment and or sometimes fanaticism, while philosophy without religion is mental speculation. So just remember, philosophy here means the comprehension of Krishna consciousness, the ability to kind of understand. And religion here means the practical application or the experience or the engagement in devotional service. The ultimate goal is Krishna. That means the ultimate goal of both is Krishna, of religion and philosophy. Because the philosophers who are sincerely searching after the absolute truth come in the end to Krishna consciousness. This is also stated in the Bhagavad Gita. You know where this is referred to. Well, Prabhupada's Bahunam Janmanamantu Jnanavan Maham Prapadyate. That even at the end, the person who is sincerely searching after the absolute truth comes to surrendering to Krishna. The whole process is to understand, meaning the whole process of whether this yoga or that, is to understand the real position of the self in relation to the super self. So here then Prabhupada says that Sankhya is basically an indirect process, and engaging oneself directly in Krishna consciousness is a direct process. Of these two, the path of Krishna consciousness is better because it does not depend on purifying the senses. Now this is very interesting part of the purport. There is no which is better, meaning which is wrong, right or wrong. But there is one that is better, Krishna, the path of engaging oneself in Krishna consciousness beyond just understanding Krishna consciousness. Because this process, see, when you are understanding Krishna consciousness by Sankhya, by philosophical speculation, at the end you have to again engage yourself in this Krishna service. Whereas when you adopt Krishna consciousness, you don't have to do anything separate. That is the means and the end. Do you understand? It's both the means to get to the end, but it is also what you will do at the end. Whereas when you adopt the Jnana Yoga process, in the beginning it's Jnana Yoga, but at the end it becomes Bhakti Yoga. Whereas in this case, you're adopting Bhakti Yoga in the form of Karma Yoga right from the beginning. So Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada writes, is itself the purifying process. In other words, it's the purifying process as well as its goal. And by the direct method of devotional service, it is simultaneously easy and sublime. So this is how Srila Prabhupada ends the purport. That there are two processes Krishna has spoken of, but one is better, because it is both the means and the end. Now, Srila Prabhupada I have a somewhat long quote from the same lecture Prabhupada gave in Los Angeles in 1968 on these verses. Arjuna has misunderstood Sankhya Yoga and Karma Yoga as two processes leading in different directions. Right? He also thinks of Sankhya as having the essential feature of sannyas, renunciation. However, there is a downside to the premature adoption of sannyas. Krishna deals with that in the next verse. That, by the way, is my comment, not Srila Prabhupada's statement. There are certain classes of men who simply philosophize, and there are certain classes of men who simply blindly follow religious ritualistic processes. The Bhagavad Gita is a scientific combination of both. You should be religious, but you should also understand everything philosophically. Otherwise, one becomes a religious fanatic. So this is Srila Prabhupada's statement, that one just philosophizes, and one may, if you take the wrong version of religious practice, then you might be just a fanatic, a religious blind follower. So both have a downside. In the Chaitanya, now so this is where it's interesting. This is where Srila Prabhupada actually gives importance to philosophical understanding, this part. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is clearly said that Chaitanyara Dayara Katha Karaha Vichar. Please consider the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. Think about it with your intelligence. You people try to understand the gifts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu by your philosophical understanding, not blindly, philosophically. And vichar karile chitta paive chamatkar. If you are actually a wise man, then you'll find it is sublime. If you simply stick to your own religious, ritualistic principles without trying to understand the philosophy of everything, then you'll become a fanatic. So we should not become religious fanatics, nor dry mental speculators. Both these classes of men are dangerous. They cannot make any advancement. You should be religious and also try to understand each and every line philosophically. We have seen many such philosophical speculators. They simply talk in the meetings and that's all. And if we examine their private character, no, I'm quoting from a lecture Prabhupada gave in Los Angeles, 1968. You're thinking, where in the Bhagavad Gita is it? It's not. You should be religious and also try to understand each and every line philosophically. We have seen many such philosophical speculators. They simply talk in the meetings and that's all. And if we examine their private character, it is less than ordinary. A person may be a nice speaker, but will that help you in your spiritual realization? On the other hand, if you chant Hare Krishna, it will give you immediate results. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that both these things need to go hand in hand. You do need philosophical realization, otherwise you'll become a fanatic. If you do not engage yourself in actual Krishna consciousness, you'll just be a dry mental speculator. So both have a downside, but if you combine them nicely, then it's very good. Text 4. So now here, Krishna mentions something interesting. It's divided between text 4 and 5. Okay. Here, Krishna actually glorifies karma yoga, meaning the path where you engage your senses in Krishna's service, rather than mental speculation. Now, mental speculation, he also calls it as sannyas. So you're going to have to remember these connections. The important characteristic he points out in these two verses and the verses following is that Jnana, Sankhya Yoga, sannyas does not purify. That's the key word. The word is not used here, but it'll become self-evident. And whereas if you engage in, not the fanatical kind, but if you engage yourself in the work with your senses, then you become purified. He also takes the meaning of Arjuna's question in a particular way. If you remember Arjuna's question, he said, why are you engaging me in this horrible work? Gore mam, this horrible, terrible work of fighting. So Krishna says that you may label your activity as horrible, but it is something that will free you from bondage. So this purification is derived from the word naishkarmya, freedom from bondage. Na karmanam anarambhan naishkarmyam purusho ashnute na cha sanyasanadeva siddhim samadhi gacchati. Na karmanam, by not karmanam, your prescribed duties, anaramba, not beginning them, not performing them. Naishkarmya, you do not become free from the karma. Purusha, the person, he does not achieve this thing. But also, by this renunciation, na siddhim samadhi, does he achieve any success? Not by merely abstaining from work can one achieve freedom from reaction. So Krishna is saying, karma yoga is not so the laws of karma are not so simple as saying, I will not do something and expect that I'll be free from karma. Laws of karma don't work like that. You do not achieve freedom from reaction, nor by renunciation alone. So just by abstaining, just by not doing, and nor by renunciation alone can one attain perfection. In other words, simply by taking sannyas, one cannot say one will be perfect. So sannyas, neither is renunciation so cheap, neither is the ashram, the social, the ashram, what's the English? The status of a sannyasi also does it enable you to have perfection. So Krishna is saying, don't think, because you phrased your question that why should I engage in horrible work? Don't think that by not doing your work, you're going to be freed from reaction. You may call it horrible, but that work, that prescribed duty, will free you from reaction. Okay. The renounced order of life can be accepted when one has been purified by the discharge of the prescribed form of duties, which are laid down just to purify the hearts of materialistic men. Now, while Srila Prabhupada is using the word materialistic men, it will become evident as we go through the rest of the verses. It actually means all of us, without exception. Every single person born in this material universe. If you're born in this universe, this applies. So it's a technical statement, meaning perhaps the Nitya Siddha who lives amongst us, it doesn't apply. But everybody else it applies. Once again, that the renounced order of life can be accepted when one has been purified by the discharge of the prescribed form of duties, which are laid down just to purify the hearts. So these prescribed duties are not something for others. Arjuna, it applied to Arjuna, it applies to us. And the other thing is, this karma yoga, it hinges on prescribed duties. So really, the student, all of you, should ask yourself, what are prescribed duties? As against those that are not prescribed. Just remember that. So, because everything hinges on that, everything. Your purification, your success, your perfection in life hinges on this prescribed duty. And it even frees you from material desires. So there's a lot invested in this prescribed duty. It's not something to be easily dismissed out of hand. So is your hand up or Prabhuji? No. Okay. Without purification, one cannot attain success by abruptly adopting the fourth order of life. Technically speaking, sannyas involves giving up one's prescribed duties. You see, that's what it does mean. Anyway, Prabhupada is going to explain that in his. There's another lecture which I quote at the end. So we'll wait for that. So abrupt, the word abrupt means you were not purified and you did something. In this case, took sannyas. So one should only do things that one has eligibility for. Otherwise, and all this eligibility requires purification. Okay. According to the empirical philosophers, Simply by adopting sannyas or retiring from fruitive activities, one at once becomes as good as Narayan. But Lord Krishna does not approve this principle. So basically, let alone becoming Narayan, one does not even become free from his reactions. Without purification of heart, sannyas is simply a disturbance to the social order. And then Srila Prabhupada says, on the other hand, if one adopts the transcendental service of the Lord, here you see, he is giving a little detail that if one perhaps neglects his prescribed duties but adopts the transcendental service of the Lord, he engages in it, then this doesn't apply to him. So that's a slight, how you say, modification of that. So of course we're going to learn more about devotional service afterwards. But first, before you adopt devotional service, you must have a clear idea of prescribed duties. Now here Prabhupada says, very short, in the same lecture, Sat-Nyas. Sannyas, this is the combination. Sat means the supreme, the ever-existing, and Nyas means renunciation. That means one who has renounced everything for serving the supreme is a real sannyas. How he dresses doesn't matter. Anyone who has sacrificed his life for the service of the Supreme Lord, he is a sannyasi. So that means every man, every woman, every person, every child who dedicates himself, who gives up everything else. See, now this point of giving up applies to a sannyasi and to a devotee. That's the point. So both of them require purification. And both of them, in just a few verses, if the purification is not there, then you become a pretender. That means you become a pretender sannyasi, and you can become a pretender devotee. Because it hinges on purification. Because remember, you're only a devotee if you dedicate everything to Krishna. Otherwise, you're a bhogi. You're not a yogi, you're a bhogi. You're the sense enjoyer. You're not giving service to Krishna. Text 5. So, in text 4, I had made the heading that there are two processes, and one of them allows you to become purified and free from bondage, from the karmic reaction. So the next question is, why is it if I don't perform an activity, I'm still bound by reactions? So here Krishna says, Nahi kaschit kshanamapi jatu tishtati akarmakrit karyate hi avashya karma sarva prakriti jair gune. So now he's giving a lesson, a fundamental education on something. What does he say? He says, everyone, sarva prakriti jair gune. Everyone is forced to act helplessly. He avashya karma. Avashya means he has no choice in the matter. According to the quality he has acquired from the modes of material nature. Prakriti jair gune means with his birth came a certain mixture of modes of nature. They define him. They bind him, but they also define him. That's his identity. Material identity, no doubt, not the soul's identity, but that's his identity here. Therefore, no one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. He is impelled. He is forced. He has no choice. Avashya. Vasha means when I have something in my control. Vash. This is in my control. But when something is avash, not in my control, the wind is blowing, threatening of rain and so many things, this is beyond my control. So my nature, my prakriti jaya gunai, they are beyond my control. They're not in my vash. I have no control over them. Therefore, a person, he cannot refrain from the force of his modes of nature that define him. Everyone, in all respects, has to do this. Now, remember, in case you're purified, you won't have to. But we wouldn't be having this discussion if you were purified. Arjuna would not be hearing Bhagavad Gita if he was purified. So Srila Prabhupada writes, it is not a question of embodied life, but it is the nature of the soul to be always active. So first of all, Srila Prabhupada is explaining that even if you didn't have the modes of nature, the soul itself is active. The soul itself, why is it active? Because it's sentient. Dead matter is not active. Living force is active. That's the difference between dead matter and the soul. Without the presence of the spirit soul, the material body cannot move. The body is only a dead vehicle to be worked by the spirit soul, which is always active and cannot stop even for a moment. Kshanamapi. So that's the foundation upon which we have to understand everything. See, just like, remember, Arjuna was lamenting for his kinsman because he thought he was the body. So Krishna gave him an education about the fact that he's the soul. He's not the body. And they're not his kinsmen. The body is changing. He'll have another body. He will never die. The body will die. Here there's another education taking place. That if you think of sannyas, if you think of giving up horrible prescribed duties, on the basis that by giving them up, I won't suffer reaction, another education is being given. The soul is always active. Eternally active. Doesn't rest for a moment. Even when you're sleeping, the soul is active. It is dreaming. The body may rest, but the soul does not rest. So based on that, the answer becomes self-evident, you see. Arjuna's question, because he was asking a question in ignorance, not knowing the nature, the reality of the modes of nature, and the constitution of the soul, other than the fact that it's eternal, it's always active. So this education is now being given to Arjuna. As such, because the soul is always active, as such, the spirit soul has to be engaged in the good work of Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, it will be engaged in occupations dictated by illusory energy. So that's the meaning of karyate hi avashya karma. He will be forced to do something. Why? Because of prakriti jai gune. He has acquired a certain combination born of the modes of nature at the time of his birth. In contact with material energy, the spirit soul acquires material modes, and to purify the soul from such material affinities, it is necessary to engage in prescribed duties. Therefore, you see now the role of prescribed duties. It's not to be dismissed. You cannot just wish it away, because you cannot wish your modes of nature away. The question of being free from the reactions of karma just by not doing activities is not the answer. You need to purify, and your prescribed duties are your path of becoming purified. Now, just because Prabhupada is just about to say it, and I'll say this part. And devotional service is a refinement on the path of prescribed duties. In other words, it does not actually depart. It's a further detail in the area of performing one's prescribed duties. Sometimes devotees also dismiss prescribed duties in the name of bhakti, in the name of devotional service. But actually they are not two contending paths. Devotional service is a particular detail within that bigger area of prescribed duties. It's that prescribed duty which is done purely for the sake of the Supreme Lord. But it is an activity. Because sometimes in the name of Krishna consciousness, devotional service, if we make the mistake of dismissing our prescribed duties, we will be unpurified. We will not be purified, we will become pretenders, and we fall down. Anyway, so Srila Prabhupada takes up this particular point about those activities done purely for Krishna. But if the soul is engaged in his natural function of Krishna consciousness, whatever he is able to do is good for him. Srimad Bhagavatam, he quotes from Narada Muni speaking to Srila Vyasadeva, Tyaktva sadharmam charanam bhujam hare bhajan napakvota patet tato yadi yatra kva vabhatram abhud amushyakin ko vartha apto bhajatam sudharmata. If someone takes to Krishna consciousness, even though he may not follow the prescribed duties in the Shastras or execute the devotional service properly, and even though he may fall down from the standard, there is no loss or evil for him. But if he carries out all the injunctions for purification in the Shastras, what does it avail him if he is not Krishna conscious? There's another reading of this verse Prabhupada himself has given, in which he says that the purpose of prescribed duties is to engage in the service of the Lord. And in other words, if you fail to do that purpose, you're not doing your prescribed duties correctly. That's the point. Do you understand? And if somebody happens to fulfill the purpose of his prescribed duties of pleasing Krishna, of serving Krishna, then even if some other duty is left undone, there is no loss. You see, because he has achieved the purpose. For example, and I'm just giving this example on the fly. You have a soldier who goes to fight against the enemy of the country. The purpose is to have victory over the enemy. That's the purpose. Now, but in order to have that purpose, sometimes they have military codes. You should do this, you should report to your superior, you should ask permission. When you get an order, you should do it. But if suppose you didn't do all those things correctly, but you gain victory over the enemy, then you have done correctly. You're a good soldier, because that's the goal of the war, is to have victory. So the purpose of all these prescribed duties actually is to please Krishna. Charanam bhujam hare. The purpose of one's swadharma. So, if one actually happens to please Krishna, and even if something else got neglected, then there is no loss. Prabhupada carries on. So the purificatory process is necessary for reaching this point of Krishna consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada is spelling it out. Therefore, sannyas or any purificatory process is to help reach the ultimate goal of becoming Krishna conscious, without which everything is considered a failure. So that's the beautiful summation and explanation of all these different concepts that have been brought up. Sannyas, one's duty and devotional service. So in the form of purification, everything is good. But if you miss, and the purification, what does purification in essence mean? Coming to Krishna consciousness. So if you miss that, then whatever you're doing is well and truly a mistake. But it should be understood that the law is, if you don't look at devotional service for a second, the existing reality is that everyone is born with a certain prescribed nature by the material modes of nature. He has a certain combination. And that impels him to act, to think, speak in a certain way. Therefore his duties, his prescribed duties, will help him to become free from that bondage. Now Srila Prabhupada writes, in his lecture, he has two lectures. One is continuing from the Los Angeles 1968, short part. Then he also speaks on this point in New Vrindavan 1976. So first the Los Angeles lecture. We saw a signboard in a yoga society in Los Angeles that said, quote, "You become silent and you'll become God," unquote. And here Krishna says that you cannot become silent even for a moment. So that was Srila Prabhupada saying. Now in New Vrindavan he says, you'll find in India many saintly persons who observe silence. Prahlad Maharaj says, it is for the Ajitindriyana. In other words, the practice of silence is for those who cannot control their senses. This process, mona, to remain silent, is meant for persons who cannot control the senses. It is better not to talk than to talk rubbish. Many people think they will advance by not talking. If you ask a question, they'll reply in writing. What is the difference between talking and writing? It is all sense gratification. And the fact is, you cannot stop the tongue working. Engage the tongue in Krishna consciousness only and do not talk material subject matters. So that was in New Vrindavan 1976. So next week we will go to that famous verse where sannyas without sufficient realization is dangerous, meaning don't be a pretender. So without sufficient realization, without sufficient purification, to be a devotee, to be a sannyasi, both are dangerous. Devotee meaning outwardly, just outwardly showing oneself to be something. He's not. Thank you very much. Are there any questions?